Welcome to Instruction Discussion, our weekly look at the latest topics and trends in education affecting schools here on Long Island and schools around the world. Whether you're a teacher, parent, or student, listen for tips and strategies to help you navigate the educational landscape. There's a bell. It's time to start today's Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boston Hill, and welcome to Instruction Discussion, where each week we will examine a recent trend or development in education and its impact on Long Island. If you can say something good that came out of the pandemic, it would be that we have a more concerted effort to practice mindfulness and take care of our social emotional selves as we care for other aspects of ourselves. We see more social emotional or SEL curricula in our schools. People are exploring more of a work-life balance and actually taking their vacation days. Now, while the pandemic may have shone a bright light on these matters, mindfulness techniques have been around for hundreds of years. Whether you practice yoga, meditation, deep breathing, tantric expressions, or anything else that helps you to experience deep introspection, the idea is to do what you can to help you deal with the toxic nature of the world around you without becoming toxic yourself. The new book, Healing Our Way Home, Black Buddhist Teachings on Ancestors, Joy, and Liberation, provides information that will help anyone cope with the world around them, whether it be meditation practices, culinary recipes, or even music playlists. Today, we have one of the authors of the book to further explain how Buddhist teachings have helped her and what she hopes will help others. Kaira Jewel Lingo is a Dharma teacher with a lifelong interest in spirituality and social justice. Inspired by her father's work with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Kaira Jewel uses her Stanford degrees in anthropology and social sciences, coupled with her studies in engaged Buddhism, to teach internationally. Through her travels, she shows others how to practice mindfulness in the current racial and social justice climate. Kaira Jewel Lingo, welcome to Instruction Discussion on 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be with you, especially since I'm a fellow Long Islander.
Yes. I saw that in your bio as well. I was going to spring that on our listeners a little bit later in the conversation, but you let us know right now. So I'm glad you're able to be with us today. You have such a storied experience, and that some of it, and what I announced in the intro, doesn't even do it justice. But how much of your background, of your life experiences, are contained within the book?
A lot. I mean, it's probably the most personal I've ever been in a public way, really telling the story of my family, my parents, my grandparents, how I grew up, all mixed in with Valerie Brown and Dr. Maricela Gomez, each of us, unpacking our journeys, how we came to our spiritual paths, what shaped us, how we, encountered religion and spirituality as children and how that shaped us. So yeah, it's more than I've shared anywhere else.
Yeah, the book kind of reads like a conversation among three people. It's like you say your piece here, and then one of the others, then I guess Ms. Brown comes on, then Dr. Gomez says what she has to say. But it just sounds like it's just one conversation of the three of you kind of just sitting around with a cup of tea and just trying to chewing the fat over the weekend.
That's exactly it. We think of it as like sitting over the kitchen table, telling our stories, understanding each other's lives.
You teach about Buddhist mindfulness, and I mean, you go all over the globe to do this. So what ages do you usually address?
So nowadays I teach mostly adults, but I did have a lot of time some years ago where I was teaching teenagers, children, families, mindfulness, and also retreats, classes, courses, days of mindfulness.
And what do you feel is like the biggest difference between teaching children and teaching adults, and two, what is the difference between teaching people in the United States versus other countries around the world?
You can't hide behind words with kids. You have to tell it straight. You have to kind of be very clear. And the things kids are concerned about, they kind of go straight to the heart. Like, how do I a very sincere question. How do I deal with this anger at someone?
Yeah, I would have to imagine that when you're talking to a child about anger or any other feelings that they may have, it would be kind of difficult because there's no, at least with an adult, you have something you can make an analogy with. With children, they're just learning that vocabulary. So they may not have an experience or something analogous to be able to apply to that. So how would you explain to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I found children very open to absorbing, taking in that we can treat our emotions like a crying child, like a baby, a younger brother or sister. We can see that part in us that's angry or upset or sad as this part that actually needs our care and attention. So they get that. They get that analogy very well because maybe they have a younger brother or sister, or maybe they've been around babies and they've cried, and so they've seen how people take care of them. So that actually they can relate to that. And I think what's so important, both for children and for adults, is to see that our emotions, there's nothing wrong with our emotions, even though they might disturb us. If we have mindfulness, we don't have to push them away, and we also don't have to let them take us over. We can go the middle way of being with them, acknowledging them, befriending them, caring for them, and learning from them, actually. They actually have a very important role to play. You mentioned social emotional learning. There's so much we can learn from getting to know our emotions, because our emotions are telling us we care about something, that something matters to us. So we can dig deeper and understand what's behind that, So with both adults and children, I found that metaphor is very powerful, of the crying child, the crying baby that needs our compassion.
And do you find that there's a difference in your approach when you're dealing with people in the United States versus people from other countries? I was going to say, or do we all really face the same problems?
I think at the heart, people want to be safe. They want to be happy. They want to protect the people they love. I mean, that's all around the world. I find every time I come into the country from another country, well, I used to live in France for 5 years and in Germany for 5 years. Every time I would come back into the country, I would notice we are a country at war, because there was just an energy of fear just as soon as you come back into the country with all the things that are, set up to review who's coming in. But I also think the U.S. is a much faster pace than other places. So I think that people that I work with, they may have a little bit less connection to people. There's a bit more of a social net maybe in other places, and it's a little more challenging to stay present with oneself because of how fast things move here. Everything's open 24 hours, and you don't find that always in other places.
Yeah, I know they call New York the city that never sleeps, and there are other cities that are like that around the country as well. But of course, we need to turn off at some point.
That's
and
right.
So being on or being open all the time also has to weigh on you mentally.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we talk about in our book, Healing Our Way Home, is finding ways to create that pause. Valerie Brown talks about having a lazy day once a week where you just have time for you, even if you can't do a whole day. Maybe it's a few hours, maybe it's 1 hour, maybe it's 15 minutes where you just put everything aside and rest and come home to yourself and listen to what's going on and get in touch with, our bodies are telling us things all the time, but we're going so fast we often can't hear them.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think the art of listening is a very very difficult skill to learn, let alone master. And when I say when we think of listening, we think of listening to everything outside of us. We don't really think about listening to our inner selves as well.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about how can we slow ourselves down to actually take the time to listen clearly and intently to our inner being?
Yeah. One of the best, most immediate ways or, doorways to really hear what's going on is just to tap into our breathing, just to feel the in-breath, feel the out-breath. And if we're agitated, we'll know it as soon as we connect with our breath. If we're uncomfortable, we'll feel it. Or if we're at ease, so our breath is a kind of diagnostic that immediately tells us how we're doing. We can feel our body if we're getting tense. Our body will tell us things if we'll just tap into that. A lot of times, if people will say, I don't know what to do, this or that, I'll say, well, if you envision doing one thing, what happens in your body? And if you envision doing the other thing, what's the reaction in your body? And if I say that right away, they know, oh, okay, I have to do this thing because the body's really clear. So, the breath, the body can help us to know what's going on. It helps us to come out of our head. So much of our day we live in our head. As soon as we wake up, our mind starts creating this thought stream, right? And keeps going all the way till we hit the pillow at night. But when we connect with our breath, when we connect with our body, that interrupts that mind stream, and we have a chance to go beneath that and actually listen to what's going on inside. And it may be, that we're sad, and the whole day we didn't know what was going on. We just felt off. And if we start to get closer to what's actually happening through the breath, through the body, then we realize, oh, this whole day I've been off because this or that watered something in me. I was sad. But we can go for days, months, even years with emotions, with kind of triggers underneath the surface, subtly pushing us to do things. And we don't even know why we're doing that. We don't know why we're talking to that person in that harsh way, or why we don't like that person. They might remind us of someone from years ago. It has nothing to do with them, but we haven't paused enough to feel, wait a minute, why is this? What's happening here? So the breath, feeling the sensations of the body, feeling the muscles, feeling, our posture, all those things can help us cue into what's going on beneath the surface.
It's amazing that you say that, as far as we may not know why we are bothered by a certain person or event or something like that. Because when I immediately thought of several students that I've come across in my years as a school administrator who have always said, well, I don't like this person. So I said, well, why don't you like them? They said, well, I don't know why. And so now if I had known this technique, I said, well, let's slow down. Let's take that breath, and so that you can calm yourself, and then maybe think back to what is it about this person that triggers something else in you. Then you'll discover why you don't like them. But to say you don't like them and you've never met them before is a little odd to me. So I think if we're able to teach our students that, whether it's through the SEL curriculum or meditation or yoga, because I know a lot of schools do those things now, maybe that will also help in the way to really allow students to so we won't have so many issues of violence towards one another and so many anger issues that are taking place in our schools now.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And sometimes it's not even from our life. It could be from our ancestors that we have certain reactions. So all of that needs to be investigated. And, but the quieter you can get, the deeper you can see these things.
You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is one of the authors of the book, Healing Our Way Home, Black Buddhist Teachings on Ancestors, Joy, and Liberation, Kaira Jewel Lingo. I'm glad that you mentioned that aspect. The trigger may actually be something that goes way back beyond us. It may be something that our ancestors have felt, and it has been literally passed down through our genetics. Because when I saw the chapter or the section in the book that talked about how we need to connect with our past in order to help with our present and our future, it kind of threw me off a little bit, because a lot of times we say, well, we need to let things go. But I think these teachings are telling us to do just the opposite.
Well, I think there's a time for each thing, because definitely letting go is important. But you can't let go of something until you've understood it, right? Like if you try to let go of something too soon, that's just avoiding it. That's not really letting go. Then you're either in denial, you're suppressing, right? But when we turn towards the things that are in us, whether it's, the difficult things maybe that we've received from our ancestors, or whether it's the wonderful things that we've received from our ancestors, because we have both always, we have a chance to really integrate them, right? To really metabolize them. And then what we don't need anymore, or what is holding us back, then we can let go of it authentically. Like we really feel lighter. We really feel, okay, this is no longer holding me back. But if we try to do that before we've integrated the lesson, then it doesn't work. It's like it boomerangs. It comes back, or it comes back in the next generation, right? Because we pass it on. But that's why this coming back home to ourselves, this healing our way home, is so important, because we've received things from the previous generations, and if we don't process them and heal them, we will pass them on. And that suffering, that, ignorance will keep going. But we have a chance in this generation, whatever generation we're in, to move things differently.
So here I actually found the proper phrase that I was looking for. It's the mindfulness practice. Actually, it was offered by Dr. Gomez. And it's taking care of ourselves now and in the past. So when you hear things like that, like, how do you take care of yourself in the past? Because we don't have a time machine to go to.
Yeah. So I tell this story in the book. It's in one of the chapters. I can't remember, but we are talking about racial healing, right? The wounds we've all, each of us have received, and then how we've worked with them. And I tell the story of this exercise. It's from nonviolent communication, where you remember a time where someone said something hurtful to you, and you're sitting in 4 different chairs responding to that person, to their words. And the first chair you sit in, if they said something hurtful, you say something hurtful back. You just, let them have it. It's aggression.
The knee-jerk
or,
response.
It's like, defending yourself, whatever, blaming them. The second chair, but it's also in a way giving yourself the space to feel anger. Like maybe you couldn't feel the anger in that moment. Maybe you weren't allowed to speak your true feelings. So it's a kind of a processing, right? It's not like rehearsing something in a negative way. It's really like releasing whatever you might have that you couldn't say in that moment. And then you imagine that person saying that hurtful thing to you again, but this time you're sitting in the next chair, the second chair, and you're blaming yourself for what happened, right? So you're saying, okay, I did everything wrong in this situation, right? And then you're in the third chair, they say that hurtful thing again, and then you have compassion for yourself, where you realize, wow, that was really hard to be spoken to in that way. That was really hurtful. I can take care. I can really hold myself for how those words hurt me. I can be there for myself. So that's a kind of being there for yourself in the past, right?
Okay.
And then in the fourth chair, you imagine that person saying that hurtful thing again, but then you try to have compassion for them, and you think, well, what were they going through that they said that nasty thing, or that, unkind thing? They must have had something, very heavy on their heart, or maybe they were hurt in that way. So, I did that exercise for not a microaggression, but like a macroaggression, something where someone had made a racial slur to me when I was traveling. And I went through those steps, and I found it very powerful, because I had sort of buried that experience and never processed it. And this exercise helped me go back and work with the pain I had felt, the shock, the humiliation, and then let my anger out of being spoken to that way, But then, I also connect with myself very compassionately for how that really impacted me. And then also have compassion for that person who was so outside of their center that they would say something like that to someone who they didn't know at all,
right.
So that was an example for me of going back to the past to heal something. So like now when I remember that, it doesn't have the same charge that it had before I did that exercise.
And I think that's a really powerful exercise because we tell people that you can't really control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it.
That's it.
And so by going through that exercise, a lot of people will stay in that first chair. Yeah. They're just angry and they're going to let you know it in that way. But then sometimes people will stay in that second chair and say, well, it was all my fault. And they'll blame themselves incessantly. And then now you're just doubling down on the negative emotions. And then it takes a lot to move to that third chair saying that, okay, I'm giving myself permission to feel bad, to say that the emotions that I'm experiencing, it's okay to feel this way. Yeah. And I don't have to hide those emotions. I don't have to suppress them. I should be allowed to feel this way. And then the last one, which I guess everybody is trying to get to, but very few do, is, let me actually put myself in their shoes. I don't know what their backstory was. I don't know what their minute before was. That minute before they came to me, what was happening then. So it may have been something that they may never even been directing it towards me. But I won't know that until I either have a conversation or I'm able to be calm enough to be able to have that talk with them.
Right. Thank you for how you walked through those so beautifully. And for me, that's a really good example of how when we face things like that, we can actually let them go truly. Because that just doesn't bother me in the same way that it did before.
So I want to move a little bit. I want to talk about another story in the book, or at least a section that you contributed to that I think will really help not only our adults, but our younger listeners as well. Because it seems like, and my children are included, it seems like everybody has a device that they're attached to.
Yes.
Right? So you contributed a part about mindfulness with our electronic devices. So walk us through, what is that about?
So we know that these devices have been created with the intention to make us addicted to them. That is the intention, because the more we look at our phones, the more we're on them, the more we can be manipulated into buying things. And the more likes, the more swipes, the more people who are creating this content make money. So they are meant to be addictive, and they are very good at making us addicted. So, and I say this as someone who, I see this in myself as well. So this meditation is really, it's an opportunity to get curious about how we relate to our electronic devices, because it's so easy to just go on automatic pilot. I know sometimes I'll pick up my phone to text someone, and then I'll see some other text and then another email, and it might be 20 minutes before I get to what I actually picked up my phone to do. It's like it trains you in distraction rather than in staying focused.
Or we see somebody else pick up their phone, and now we automatically have to pick ours up.
That's it. Exactly. Those mirror neurons fire in our brains. So we can get curious about how we're interacting with it. One thing a friend of mine does is every time she has the urge to pick up her phone to do something, she first pauses to think, why am I doing this? Right? And I've done this a few times after she told me that. And I was like, a lot of the times I picked up my phone because I was bored or, wanted some, there's this book called Dopamine Nation, where every time you pick up your phone, you get a hit of dopamine because there's something interesting. There's some news. There's some, it's so hard sometimes just to feel content with what's right here and now, like the sun filtering through the trees or the sound of the birds or our own heartbeat. We find it boring or whatever, unpleasant. And so we want to escape into something. So I think that's part of this meditation, is to help us really investigate, what are we using our phones for? Are we using them? Of course, there are many, very good and practical things we use our phones for, but outside of that, there's a lot of other intentions that we have, maybe to escape, maybe to distract ourselves. And so that meditation is about noticing in the body what's going on. Just like, we talked about emotions at the beginning, how we can, be with them. We can actually notice that sense of distraction or restlessness if we breathe with that in the body, if we bring kindness, compassion, interest, friendliness. Breathing in, I feel restless. Breathing out, I take care of my restlessness. We can actually be with those difficult emotions rather than trying to escape them by getting into something kind of meaningless on our phone. Although my one exception is some of those animal videos. I love them so much. I think those are those make life very sweet.
Well,
so
I guess
some things are very good.
I guess we all have to have one vice, one exception when it comes to the social media rule. I guess that's fine. But we could go on for hours and hours and your voice is just, you have that I guess that tantric voice, that meditative voice as well. So it's very soothing. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will appreciate that. But we would like to thank Kaira Jewel Lingo, who, along with Valerie Brown and Dr. Maricela Gomez, wrote the book Healing Our Way Home, Black Buddhist Teachings on Ancestors, Joy, and Liberation. Thank you for coming on to our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Once again, my name is Kevin Boston Hill, and thank you all for listening to Instruction Discussion right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.